Today, I'm going to tell you a childhood story. When I was a kid, I was a scaredy cat. Well, maybe it's fair to say that all kids were and are scaredy cats. It happens when you're born and grow up in a big world where several things we don't know happen all the time. It's kinda ironic that as you get older, you start understanding and noticing things that make it even more terrifying. But that's not the topic of this video. Through most of my childhood, anything scary or related to horror would cause me to become very scared. This even applies to things that weren't exactly horror but had certain horror elements in them. For example, the Jurassic Park kitchen scene, Voldemort's face in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, the werewolf from Prisoner of Azkaban, even seeing Willem Dafoe as Green Goblin in Spider-Man. Those were things enough to make me hide behind the couch until the scenes were over, even though I'd always spied the TV screen from my hiding spot just so I wouldn't miss anything. But the funniest thing about it is that every time I went to a movie store, I would always check the covers of horror movies only to regret it instantly, and think about them for the rest of the day and then sleep at my parents' room because those pictures wouldn't leave my mind. It's such a stupid thing to do, right? Why would I check the horror stuff if I was so scared of it? Well, maybe those were the first red flags of the disturbed-minded freak I'd become someday. Anyway, these are things kids tend to do. We are curious and constantly try to fight our fears, even if some of them leave us scarred for the rest of our lives. That reminds me of a time I was in front of a store that sold those Rock Band t-shirts, you know? I guess I was 15 years old at the time. The damage made by the horror genre was already done in my mind, and I was starting to pave my way to become the horror buff I am today. At any rate, the store had a mannequin wearing an Eddie mask, and there was this kid of what appeared to be 7 years old or something who was walking on the street with their father, and that kid looked at the mask and let out some sort of quiet but terrified gasp. Their father doesn't even notice it, not even when the kid would get startled every time someone bumped on them, and that continued all the way down the street. I'll admit that I laughed my ass off, even though I knew not only that the kid probably became traumatized for the rest of their lives because of that, but also because something similar happened to me. In my case, I was walking with my father on the streets of the center of São Paulo. That was when, for some reason, he suddenly stopped in front of an electronics store. In front of it there was a TV playing the clip of Michael Jackson's Thriller, and when Michael became a werewolf, get away! Holy moly, I just froze there and couldn't move. I don't remember letting any gasps out, although I remember that everything around me suddenly seemed scarier than it was before, and that damn werewolf wouldn't leave my mind for the rest of the week. Well, I mean, it still looks scary, but until that point in my life, I wasn't used to that sort of stuff, and I was like 5 or 6 years old, so yeah, pretty creepy stuff to see out of nowhere as a kid. With that said, I think you entirely get the point of me not enjoying horror as much when I was a child. Of course, as I grew up, I tried some horror movies to test my courage or just out of curiosity, but it took me a lot of time to get into the genre. Before that, my contact with it wasn't as direct, except for one time, when I played a horror game. Back then, horror games were a thing I didn't even know existed until I played this game specifically, which, just so you know, wasn't the game that made me get into horror. The achievement goes to a little game called Amnesia: The Dark Descent. But before fully getting into that, I need to tell you one more thing about myself. I love dinosaurs. I love learning about them, talking about them, and watching stuff that has them in it. And that's a fact that everyone in my family knows. So much so that every time someone sees me after a long time, they say, "Last time I saw you, you were very young and wouldn't shut the fuck up about dinosaurs. You gave me knowledge about them I didn't even know I needed in my life until you told me for no reason whatsoever." Well, they don't say it exactly like that, but it's always something of that nature. Which is funny, since nowadays every time I go to family gatherings, I just stay quiet all the time because I don't want to talk to anyone. Guess when we become adults, we just get more and more recluse and bitter, huh? Anyway, since everyone in my family knew I loved dinosaurs, a cousin of mine came to me one day and talked about this game where you'd get on an island and fight dinosaurs. and I was like, say no more, where the fuck is this game? Of course, without his swearing. I didn't see any footage of it, any cover of it, any pictures, nothing. I just wanted that game as soon as possible because it sounded dope, and I was stoked as hell. I was stoked because in my head I thought it would be a game exactly like the Lost World Jurassic Park, but playing the hunter sections that I never got to play on that game because I was never able to finish the compy section to get the codes. That the Lost World game is cool and all, except that you are unable to save your game, and it is absurdly difficult. Anyway, my cousin said this new game was called Dino Crisis. I got even more stoked. That name sounded dope. I didn't even know what a crisis was, but it had Dino in the title. I couldn't wait another second. I just wanted to play that game, and I wanted it now! Then on the same day, my cousin brought me a copy of Dino Crisis 1 and 2. The covers looked awesome, and they left me dazzled. Especially Dino Crisis 2, because it had a T-Rex on it. Yes, I still think T-Rexes are cool as hell, even if they're overused in pop culture. I don't care. T-Rexes are cool. So when those games got into my hands, I started to foam at the mouth. I was eager to get home and play them immediately. So when we got there, first thing I did was shove the first game inside my PS1 and start playing. And then the menu appeared, and I gotta admit, it was kind of pudding. I mean, I had played some games before that didn't have any music in the menus, but not like that. It was too silent. An eerie silence. Only the menu with the title and the bloody raptor claws on the cover. Red flags were appearing and I just straight up ignored them because dinosaurs. Then I started the game and the T-Rex roar that plays when you press start was a ripoff of the Jurassic Park one. So yeah, the game was doing everything right to make me excited to play it. Then the cutscene came in. I thought it was awesome. But I didn't get anything besides the visual narrative because I didn't understand anything in English at that time. But I got the characters getting on the island and Cooper getting eaten by the worst looking tyrannosaur I have ever seen in any media. At the time I thought it still looked really dope though because again, it was my favorite dinosaur and it was killing people and then roaring to the moon, based as hell. Finally the actual game started. I admit that the graphics kinda let me down a bit because I thought it was gonna be exactly like the cutscene, the most revolutionary graphics I have ever seen so far, but it looked cool to me anyway. I didn't get much about games, so I just accepted it. Not to say that the graphics sucks, since I really like these polygonal graphics from the old survival horror games to this day. They add a lot to the charm, you know? Anyway, the game started, and I didn't know what the fuck I should do. I didn't understand English, remember? After 30 minutes walking around, I finally figured it out. I had no freaking idea that I just needed to enter that door and grab the obvious spinning key. Then I got back to outside, where another cutscene happened, and once more, I didn't get what was being said at all. For me, they were just mumbling nonsense like and then I assumed I had to follow Gale, so that's what I did. And then it happened. It appeared before me, the thing that would leave a scar so huge in my subconscious that little Wen would never be the same ever again. That's right, I'm talking about him. The mutilated corpse on the ground.
That's disgusting.
When I first saw that, I just stood there, frozen for what it felt like ages, but in reality were just like 10 seconds. But as soon that cutscene was over, I just stood up, turned off my PS1 and never touched that game until I was 17 years old. I didn't even get to the first Velociraptor, which would appear shortly after that. And even though it looks kinda goofy nowadays, I have never seen something as violent as that in a video game or movie before. That shit suddenly looked too real for 7-year-old me. I was so frightened that suddenly the T-Rex in the cover of Dino Crisis 2 looked really fucking scary to me. Because the only thing going through my mind was something like, if the first game is like that, imagine the second one! Which I also wouldn't play for a very long time until I found out that Dino Crisis 2 isn't a full-on horror game. After that knowledge, I just wouldn't stop playing it. That mutilated corpse was branded in my little brain. Everywhere I went and everywhere I looked, I was afraid of finding a dead body on the floor. At that time, seeing corpses in that state was a new big deal for me. I have seen dead people and even mutilated arms in movies, but that was something I could get behind. Now, half a man? No, that shit was too much. I never thought someone could die that way. Nowadays, I watch scenes of someone getting ripped to shreds and I'm like, huh, that's fine. But back then, that shit was guaranteed to pop into my imagination at every moment, even the most inconvenient moments. And I feel really sorry for my mom, because after that she didn't have a moment of peace. That night I had to sleep in my parents' bedroom. For the rest of the week, I couldn't even go to the corridor toilet, because I was afraid of stumbling on a dead person on the floor. Yeah, my imagination was running wild, okay? But then, 1 week later, I just forgot about it. I was never brave enough to try playing that game again, at least for a very long time. Though that's not to say I never saw anything about Dino Crisis after that. Even though the game left me traumatized, I became obsessed with it. I'd look for pictures and everything I could grasp about it to learn what I had lost for not playing. That's also how I discovered that gameplays were a thing. This led me to other games that would also become obsessions, such as Silent Hill, Fatal Frame, and Resident Evil. Especially this last one, which also gave me a similar emotional response to Dino Crisis, but on a much smaller scale. This is ironic, given that Silent Hill and Fatal Frame are much scarier in terms of content, story, and themes, but that's a subject to another video. I guess I can quickly tell that Resident Evil story for you. At that time, I was already 12 years old and a bit more used to horror as a whole. I was still really scared of it, but I could sit through horror movies without having to hide behind a couch. So one day I went to a cousin's house, not the one that told me about Dino Crisis, a different one. He was playing Resident Evil 3 on the PS2, which was kinda intriguing to me because I didn't even know that was possible. At that point, I had heard friends talking about Resident Evil, but I never actually looked for it on the internet, so that was my very first contact with the games. At first I thought it looked kinda silly. I was already unaccustomed to the limitations of the PS1 and was embracing the PS2, but even though I thought it looked dumb, I was into it, even if the concept of the game sounded really fucking stupid to me. Zombies? Mutated monsters? Giant animals? In one game? That was ridiculous. Why would anyone think that's a good and scary idea? I don't even need to say that went right back at me like a punch, right? Like, Nemesis was kinda scary, but even at that time I acknowledged that it was a cool kind of scary, so it didn't affect me as much. What really scared me was, brace yourselves. That's right, the zombies and their funny as fuck moans. You know, the ones that sound like someone who just deposited the biggest dump of their lives in a toilet. But remember, back then I didn't know other Resident Evil games. I couldn't measure the goofiness of the zombie moans, so that shit was also kinda scary to me. And so far, zombies to me were like the generic kind of zombie you'd see in a cartoon or a movie. At that point, I still didn't know that George Romero's films existed, so my knowledge about the subject was non-existent. That night, I didn't sleep in my parents' bedroom, but I was sure scared of sleeping in the dark, so I just pretended to have fallen asleep while reading a book, until I actually fell asleep, so my mom would turn off the lights for me. Best mom! But even if the zombie moans and designs would pop into my mind and leave me scared, my horizons for games, especially horror ones, were just starting to expand. It might have taken me a while to play these games for real, but while I didn't, I'd always watch other people play them and I had a great time doing it. Especially a channel called Louis Xiao, which was pretty important to me at this phase because a lot of channels had people talking over the games. And this channel in specific uploaded gameplays without any commentary, which was exactly what I needed to immerse myself. I could not understand any languages besides mine, and I didn't want to watch videos with people speaking over the footage, not even in Portuguese. So yeah, even though you last posted something over 10 years ago and you are definitely not gonna see this, thanks a lot Louis Xiao for uploading those videos. They introduced me to tons of games that I wouldn't know about if it wasn't for your videos. It took me 6 more years to sit and play all these games in their entirety. I had a blast, especially with Dino Crisis and Resident Evil 2. Dino Crisis has a special place in my heart, even if it left me traumatized for a long time. I thought the game was really fun when I finished it. It felt like a true accomplishment. I challenged my fear and finally beat it. Even though at 17 years old, the graphics no longer scared me, but these motherfuckers sure did. I'm not afraid of dinosaurs, but what they did with them in Dino Crisis was something that not even Resident Evil could do, and I dare to say, not even with Nemesis. The jump scares and the fact that the raptors could sniff your blood and follow you were all really effective at keeping me on my toes. They'd only do something with a similar feel to it in Resident Evil 7 and Resident Evil 2 Remake. Also, this game has much more difficult puzzles than any Resident Evil game. I hope one day Dino Crisis gets the treatment it deserves, with remakes and all that jazz. I know Gun Survivor 2 and Dino Crisis 3 might not be good, but the first two were masterful at delivering fun, intense, scary, and ridiculously bonkers experiences in the best B-movie format these sort of games could achieve, but with dinosaurs. If you agree and found the story fun, don't forget to leave your thoughts in the comments. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video and subscribe to see more of my weird stuff. This was supposed to be a proper video essay heavily related to the subject I've gone into this video, but I've been writing the script for that since the beginning of the year, and nothing good is coming out of it, so I just decided to take off a part of what made it so long and turn it into a separate video. I hope this helps me to finally write that thing. I'll see you guys later. Bye!